parts of particularly the Hittite treaties. And again, you can see Collins. Those page numbers aren't right, but you can find the new ones. I mean, this is with the old edition, but it's what you read. Preamble, historical prologue, stipulations of demands, ratification, list of witnesses, blessings and curses. The reason why those things are important is that that is almost exactly the same way in which Deuteronomy is laid out. And that is Deuteronomy, the way in which Deuteronomy expresses the relationship that we have with God, is yet again based on the vassal treaty. I can't stress this enough, obviously. Yeah, and again, you can just see there in number 4, we saw this with Abraham, right? Abraham makes a covenant. Remember, God says, get all these animals, and he cuts them in two, and there's a, you remember we talked about this? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool, yeah, and he walks in. What's remarkable about that little story is that it's actually God that walks in the pieces, right, which is really cool. That's not the way it works in Sinai. We are the ones that walk in the pieces at Sinai. And that's actually important as well. So far so good? Excellent. There's also one more treaty, and actually it does appear sometimes. Suppose that we have a vassal that does hear about, through no overwhelming, just out of the goodness of his heart, or her heart, finds out about conspiracy against suzerain, and goes, maybe even outside of the vassal treaty, goes and tells suzerain about the conspiracy, the overthrow that's being planned, the coup that's being planned. And the suzerain takes care of that, right? Investigates and actually does away with the conspiracy. The problem here is that now the suzerain is in obligation to the vassal. And that's not good, because we have to make sure that the relationship is set. And so what will happen in that type of situation is that what will happen is that the suzerain will give the vassal land, a certain parcel of land, as the vassal's own, to do with as he sees fit. Again, in the ancient world, in Mesopotamia, that is in Assyria, in Babylonia, in Egypt, it was in fact the king that owned the whole thing. It was the king of the country, and that meant that everything that goes on in the country is the king's business, because there's no private property in the ancient world. Hope you know that, right? No private property. It just, the king owns everything. Except with a land grant treaty. And that is, the king can actually give a parcel of land in the country to the vassal in perpetuity. And what that little phrase means, forever. That the vassal will have this land forever. It is protected. And in fact, the vassal can do whatever the vassal wants to with this land forever. And in fact, the main way in which you can recognize a land grant treaty is by the word forever in it. Because obviously a vassal treaty isn't going to have the word forever in it, because we're always afraid that the vassal's going to, well, do exactly what we do in our relationship with God, right? So it can be broken rather easily. Land grant treaty can't be broken. It's a forever covenant. This type of relationship between God and human beings actually does occur. And we'll see an excellent example of it. We saw a little bit of an example of it with Abraham in the second covenant in Genesis 17. If you go back and you take a look at the establishment of the covenant that God makes with Abraham, you'll see there the word forever quite often, quite a few times. This will be the covenant forever. Again, circumcision becomes the sign of the covenant forever. Forever becomes. And so that second version of the covenant in Genesis 17 sort of becomes a mini sort of land grant treaty type relationship. We're going to see an even bigger one coming up. Just one more thing, and that is in the New Testament, the Trinity is kind of not quite as clear as it was in the 4th century. I don't know if you know that. In fact, Revelation makes a big deal about this, about the relationship between, in fact, God and Jesus Christ. And if you know Handel's Messiah, you know this very well. Right? And he shall reign forever and ever. And he shall reign forever. Hallelujah, hallelujah, right? Again, that relationship between the Father and the Son there, between God and Jesus Christ, is in fact set up to be a land grant treaty, and that is that God has given this authority to Jesus forever. Sound good? Cool. Three relationships, or three types of treaties in the ancient world: purity treaty, vassal treaty, land grant treaty. Questions, concerns, comments, prayer requests, donations? Cool, awesome. Vassal treaty is the most important as far as understanding relationships between humans and God in the Bible. Cool. As far as the stipulations go between suzerains and vassals, those stipulations often take the form of law. And in law, and again, you already know this because you did your reading, but I just want to point it out because it's actually kind of important. There are two types of laws in the ancient world. What's called apodictic law, and there's casuistic law. Casuistic, yep, that's right. Apodictic law, I don't want to talk about the etymology. Apodictic law is just do it, right? Or don't do it, right? Don't do that, don't do that. It gets direct. You can say what is expected. And again, as we'll see in just a second, the Ten Commandments are basically apodictic type laws. There's also another type of law in the ancient world. In fact, this is the most common type of law. In fact, it's the most common type of law that we know about in our own Texas Law Code, United States Law Code, and that is it's based on cases. And you can see case at the very beginning of the second one. And what a case is a little, I always like to think about it as a little story. Somebody went out and was building a house, and they were working on the roof, and they didn't have any protection to actually hold them on the roof, and they rolled off the roof and they broke their neck. And so now what happens, right? And so we have in fact, so this is Prothero. It's Kirby. No, that's Selectman. I keep forgetting Selectman. Selectman. Then there's Kirby. And then there's Bridwell. Remember the library I was talking about? And then you go about half a mile and there's a law school, right? So we have a whole school that sort of does this type of stuff, right? The Bible's going to do it too. And that is we have these little cases, right? And it's based on apodictic law, and that is we have certain things about, private property. We have certain things about relationships between employers and employees. We have certain things about just sort of assumed type of things. But then what happens when? If X happens, then that's the penalty. Because everything that's wrong isn't just plain old wrong. Sometimes there's mitigating circumstances. So far, so good? I mean, you know that. A kid knows that. 5-year-olds know that. And so casuistic law is set up. If such and such happens, this is the penalty. Or, I guess, theoretically, although it doesn't occur that much in the Bible, if such and such good thing happens, then this is the reward. It's not much at all, for obvious reasons. Look at yourself in the mirror. It's normally if something bad happens, then this is the penalty. So apodictic law, casuistic law. Sound good? Cool. At the bottom of that page, I just list various types of what I call legal corpora, that is bodies of law in the Bible. We've got the Ten Commandments. Something else we're going to take a look at today is called the Covenant Code. That is Exodus 20, basically 21 through 23. It starts actually in the middle of 20, but 21 through 23. We have a priestly code, that is the first half of the book of Leviticus. We have the holiness code, which is basically the second half of Leviticus, and then we have the Deuteronomy. Basically, it's all Deuteronomy laws. The reason why I list these out, the reason why it's important to sort of know that there are different legal corpora in the Bible, is that there are contradictions between them. They are different legal codes. I would assume from different places and or different times, compiled by perhaps different types of people that saw things differently. And so you can't just sort of take the law as sort of a block type of thing. In fact, Deuteronomy is going to see things, and again, part of when we get to Deuteronomy, you're going to see this. It's going to hit you like a ball being hammered between the eyes. Deuteronomy is going to see things very differently than, for example, the Covenant Code. And we'll actually see examples of this. And then Leviticus is going to see things totally different than the Covenant Code and Deuteronomy. And so we've got different bodies of law in the Bible, and that's important, because if you think that your relationship with God is based on, having a relationship with God is based on obeying the law, you're sunk. Which one? Right? In fact, there is a whole body of Jewish literature called the Talmud, which is huge volumes, and basically that whole body of literature is basically how do we make sense of these various types of laws if we actually, I don't know, try to obey them, which we don't have to because of Jesus Christ. Sound good? Cool, awesome. If you will, turn in your Bibles to Exodus 19. And we're going to back up just a little bit. Cool, Exodus 19. So if you remember, we had the crossing of the sea, that is, God saved us from the Egyptians. We had a story about water that we couldn't drink. We had a story about food that we didn't have. We had a story about water, because there wasn't any. We had a story about God saving us from the Amalekites. Boink, 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 remember inclusio, right? So like, rescue us, water, food, water, rescue us. Then we have a story in 18 about how God, or not God, Moses' father-in-law sort of gets involved with stuff. My father-in-law is pretty good. Gets involved with stuff and gives him some advice about how to deal with people. But in 19, what they finally do is they reach Sinai, which is kind of important. On the third new moon, after the Israelites had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that very day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. They had journeyed from Rephidim, entered the wilderness of Sinai, and camped in the wilderness. Israel camped there in front of the mountain. You got it? Close your eyes. Close your eyes. So we left Rephidim, we went through the wilderness, and now we're camped at the bottom of the mountain. You see it? Awesome. Okay. Open your eyes. Then Moses went up to God, and God called to him from the mountain, saying, "This is what you say to the house of Jacob. Tell the Israelites, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians." And you know who the Egyptians are, right? They're the ones that were killing us, right? It wasn't that we just don't like them. It's that they were actually seeking our extermination, right? You have seen what I did to the Egyptians. And not only that, but how I bore you on eagle's wings, and I brought you to myself. And he will bear you up. Everyone. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the whole point there isn't like some nice song. It's that it's been relatively easy. You have been, again, it's a wilderness. But in fact, it's been an easy trip. You're not even supposed to be here. Actually, it's like flying on Lufthansa. Right? First class. And in fact, it's not that you bought the ticket. In fact, I'm the one that in fact was the pilot. Right? I'm the one that brought you here. And I brought you here in a relatively easy manner. I brought you to myself. Well, of course he brought them to himself, because there's already a relationship. He already loves them. Now therefore, oh, there's a therefore, right? Therefore, if you obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession out of all the peoples. Indeed, the whole earth is mine, but you're going to be for me a priestly kingdom. That is a group of people that have sort of religious and political power together. A priestly kingdom, a holy nation. Both of those things. These are the words that you speak to the Israelites. So Moses goes down. So remember, he went up, now he goes down. There's going to be an escalator on Sinai, because this is going to happen a lot. So Moses came, and he summoned the elders of the people, and he set before them all the words that the Lord had commanded him. And the people all answered as one, everything that the Lord has spoken we will do. Let's all say that. Ready? Here we go. Everything that the Lord has spoken, we will do. Ha, gotcha. We'll see. There's a thing about shrimp that we're going to see later. We'll see. Everything that the Lord has spoken, we will do. Just notice that the people themselves recognize this relationship is already there. The people already recognize that this is in fact a relationship of grace. The people already recognize that there's love in this relationship. And they're more than willing at this point to do everything that God has said. Moses goes back up, reported the words of the people to the Lord, and the Lord said to Moses, I'm going to come to you in a dense cloud in order that the people can hear when I speak with you, so they will trust you forever. And so they're going to hear the conversation that goes on between them, so that they'll know that whenever Moses speaks, Moses knows what he's talking about. It's not going to be the great Oz, great and terrible, right? It's actually going to be a real relationship. And so when Moses said, so he goes back down, when Moses told the words of the people, when Moses had told the words of the people to the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, have them wash their clothes, and again, we'll talk more about this in Leviticus, but these are sort of cultic actions, religious actions, right? Go to the people, have them wash their clothes, prepare for the third day, because on the third day the Lord's going to come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. You set limits for the people all around, saying, be careful and don't go up to the mountain or touch the edge of it. Any who touch the mountain should be put to death. Right? And again, we'll talk about this. It sounds weird, but there's actually a reason for this. Any who touch the mountain shall be put to death. No hand shall touch them, but they shall be stoned or shot with arrows, which I think is kind of interesting, because I'll talk about it just a little bit. There's a thing about holiness, and that is that there's a tactile. Again, this is Old Testament, New Testament. This is the reason why Jesus touches so many people, right? A woman comes to him and she touches to him. And remember, the touch is really important in the Bible, because there's a certain aspect of holiness that is tactile. And the thing with holiness is that actually it's rather dangerous. It's kind of like uranium. There's a power to it. And so the problem is that if anyone, I'll just go ahead and say this, if anyone touches Sinai, then they themselves become a type of Sinai. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because, I don't know if you know this, but God is very large, and you are very small, right? And so if you become a type of Sinai, nobody can touch you. And there's nothing else you can do. There's nowhere you can go. And so that's the reason why you have to be killed. It sounds harsh, but it works with the calculus of the whole thing. And you can't be killed by being knocked out. You can't be killed by a knife. You have to be killed in such a way that nobody touches you. So because of that tactile type of thing. So they're stoned or they're shot with arrows. Whether animal or human being, they can't live, right? Because there has to be this thing with holiness. When the trumpet sounds a long blast, they can go up on the mountain. So there's a certain boundary that actually can be crossed at the appropriate time. So Moses went down the mountain to the people, and he consecrated the people. They washed their clothes, and he said to the people, prepare for the third day. Oh yeah, and also don't have sex. Which again, we'll talk about it a little bit, because there's a reason. But yeah, don't have sex. So on the morning of the third day, here we go. There was thunder, there was lightning, as well as a thick cloud on the mountain. There was a blast of a trumpet so loud that all the people who in the company trembled, right? It's kind of an alarm type of thing, right? So there's lightning, there's thunder, there's a cloud, there's this sound of alarm. What all of this stuff is, this stuff that sort of accompanies God whenever God shows up, we're going to see the same thing at the very beginning of the book of Ezekiel. We're going to see the same thing in several other, in Isaiah 6. All of this stuff, and again, it's like a storm, it's like lightning, it's thunder, it's sound, and it's scary. All of this stuff is called glory. Growing up at the Pentecostal church, I always thought glory meant, yep, I agree, glory, right? But in fact, glory is all the stuff that accompanies God whenever God moves. And it's kind of eerie, it's kind of spooky. Because God is very large. We're very small. So all of this stuff is going on the mountain, and the people are scared.